All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, alhamdulillah, we've reached up to Bab 6, or the chapter 6 of the book of Mukhtasar Shu al-Iman. And of course, we now get into the points about the next life. And the reality is, of course, when we talk about the last day, we talk about Yawm al-Qiyamah, what happens after that. These are actually from the imaniyat that we need to learn. We need to actually know them in the sense of that we believe in them. And of course, to not believe in them is a form of kufr. So of course, as we know, some of the Quraysh, they would believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they would dispute that whether there is a Yawm al-Qiyamah or a day of resurrection. I think for us, partly is that, of course, when we think from a spiritual perspective, knowing that the day of judgment is coming, that everyone will be requited for the deeds that they have done is very important, because, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. And so it's important that, you know, on the day that that on the day when neither wealth nor children will benefit you except for those who come with a pure heart. And the concept of a pure heart is very important. Actually, you'd argue it is the most important thing, whereby, as we know in a hadith, that people may pray a lot, they may fast a lot, but because they, for example, hold enmity between people. We went through the middle of Sha'ban on the Monday night, and of course in the hadith it mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive all except for those who associate partners with Allah or hold enmity for people. And these are things which are the actions of the heart. You can pray all you want, 20 rak'ah, 50 rak'ah, 100 rak'ah, but if you have a dharra, or even a small seed of, for example, arrogance, or you have anything which is considered to be vile, jazakumullah khair, anything which is a form of hiqd, or any of the, or riyah, which is ostentation, any of these things which can affect the heart, these are things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will potentially punish someone for them if he doesn't forgive them. So this is something which is very important. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He keeps our hearts clean. So the first one he says, based on the speech of Allah, the sixth from the branches of faith is belief in the last day. So based on the speech of Allah, وَقَاتِلُوا الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, that fight those of the people of the book who do not truly believe in Allah and the last day. And we talked about, of course, the command for fighting, etc., and what that means. Halimi or Hulaymi in some narrations said, its meaning is to believe that the days of the world shall end and their passing diminishes the total duration. As a result, this universe shall be destroyed one day. In the recognition and acceptance of the world coming to an end is also the recognition and the acceptance of its beginning, for the everlasting cannot come to an end or change. In the two authentic collections of the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he said, by him in whose hand is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam's soul, the hour will most certainly occur whilst their garment will be spread in front of them, but they will not be able to sell it, meaning it comes very quickly. Nor will they be able to fold it up. And the hour will most certainly occur when a man has just turned away with the milk of his she-camel, having milked it, and he will have raised a morsel to his mouth, but will not be able to eat it. Meaning, in that time, when he's just milked the camel, and he comes to drink from it, the qiyamah will take place, and it's very sudden. So, of course, as we mentioned, that the end of the world or the day of resurrection, this is what happens after death. So, of course, you have someone passes away, they go into the grave, we know the three questions are asked, and then, of course, we go into the grave, and we know, as many of us would have heard, that you will see either a pit of hellfire or you'll see a garden of Jannah in the window, a portal into the hereafter, and then those who believe, inshallah, they'll be told to sleep. And of course, their grave will be expanded considerably as far as the eye can see. And they will sleep, and they will be like that until Yawm al-Qiyamah, when they will wake up. As for the disbeliever, then it will constrict, and they'll be in pain. And of course, there will be a man inside with them who will be hitting them as well. This is from the meanings of the hadith. Now, when we think of Yawm al-Qiyamah, you hear a lot of major and minor signs. So the scholars, they said there's alamat al-sughra wa kubra. There are minor signs and there are major signs. So from the minor signs, and I might ask you as well if there's many, but from them are things, for example, the high-rise buildings, which we say, or we see in mashallah, places like Dubai, and you see in Saudi, high-rise buildings everywhere, right? And of course, the imagery is so, subhanallah, profound that, they said that, barefooted like Bedouins would be doing it, right? So that's one. Of course, earthquakes increase. So more earthquakes, sinkholes is in the ahadith where basically there'll be holes in the earth, and this is increasing. We see many stories of this. We know in women will be clothed, but they will be naked. There'll be time passing quickly. I mean, I don't know about yourselves, but I feel time passes very quickly. Compared to, say, 10, 20 years ago, I feel it's passing a lot more quickly, right? There's the famous one, which it goes on social media, but it's very true, where the Rasul ﷺ said in a hadith, which is in Hadith Muslim, in Sahih Muslim, that the hour will not be established until rivers and meadows return to Arabia. I don't know if when you've seen these pictures, and they're real. I remember, as I used to live in Jeddah, and we used to go to Mecca, and also sometimes when we used to go to Medina. This was in 2011 till 14, 15. And I remember every year that I would travel, I would see a bit more greenery. I'd see a bit more greenery. And now you think, subhanAllah. To think, though, that in this particular area, it's pure desert. But to see greenery coming out like that. And they said that there was a study, I don't know where the study was, in a place called Naft, essentially. It's a part of the desert, where they said that when they did archaeological digs, they said that there were previously rivers in those areas. Meaning that at that time, long time ago, long before the Rasul ﷺ, rivers were there, then it changed into desert, and so now it's going to go back into rivers and meadows. This process is already happening. The Euphrates, for example, they said it's going to give so much gold and people will fight for it, and they'll kill each other. The Euphrates River is year on year getting less and less and less. And so, there's so many signs which we say, the Rasul ﷺ, Asdaq al-Qa'ilin, he is the most truthful, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay, so any other minor signs you can think of very quickly? Have you heard this one about that your thigh will speak to you? What do you think that is? Honestly, you know what? I don't think that's ba'id. I don't even think it's far, right? To think that, everyone stores it in their pocket. We don't know, but there's also a hadith which says that a fitna will enter into every Arab household. Some people said it was the internet. We can't confirm, right? But it is a source of fitna. It's okay as well, but it is a source of fitna in terms of other elements. We don't know. Is AI going to come in? Is that what going to be the real meaning? Wallahu ta'ala alam. But there's no doubt that many of the minor signs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they're things that you can relate to. What about major signs? What are some major signs very quickly? Yes, so that's the big major sign right at the end. Anything else? Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, yes. And so do they come after or before Dajjal? So they come generally after Dajjal. You have the Dajjal, and then you have, of course, who else comes around that time? Imam Mahdi, Isa alayhi salam. They said he'll come down on the minaret in the Umayyad Mosque in Syria. But there are many other signs. Of course, the beast. The beast is an interesting one. Some of the scholars said that, it had different parts of an animal together with it, and it'll have the staff of Musa alayhi salam and the ring of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Some of the scholars said, no, it's just kind of metaphorical. It's actually a person who will spread that, because it's mentioned in the hadith that he'll mark the believers and he'll mark the disbelievers, right? And so these are some indications. You also have, for example, the smoke. There's going to be a great smoke which is going to take over the whole of the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But all of these are signs who are yet to come. And so, of course, it's something which we believe in, especially when it comes from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How? We don't know. The main point, however, before we move on to the next part, is that the concept of resurrection, or the Yawm al-Akhir, is basically the reckoning with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will establish justice. So in the hadith it's mentioned how a hornless goat will take retribution from a horned goat. Why is this used? Because the point being is that even an animal which doesn't have an aql in that sense, right? They will take their retribution because they were wronged. So of course the humans are more deserving of that, right? And so this is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, and we just have to, it's for us, it's important that when you have dealings with people, know that these are the things you need to look after the most. They say hukukul ibad, which are the rights of people, can be more than the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might do something incorrect. For example, you might do something in private which is not right. It's between you and Allah. He may decide to forgive you. If you've taken the right of someone, you've stole from them, you've backbitten about them, He will make sure that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that individual is the one who's going to decide whether He forgives you or not. So that's why they say that be very careful with your dealings in that way. Okay, so then the next part, he says, al-Iman bil-ba'thi ba'd al-maut. So he says, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى زَعَمَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَن لَّن يُبْعَثُوا قُلْ بَلَى وَرَبِّي لَتُبْعَثُنَّ. وَلِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى قُلِ اللَّهُ يُحْيِيكُمْ ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُمْ ثُمَّ يَجْمَعُكُمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. ولحديث عمر بن الخطاب في صحيح في حديث الإيمان أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله وبالبعث من بعد الموت وبالقدر كله. So he says here that from the 8th or the 7th branch is that based on the speech of Allah, the disbelievers claim that they will not be raised from the dead. Say, O Prophet, yes indeed, I swear by my Lord, you will be raised. Also due to the speech of Allah, that say it is Allah who gives you life, then causes you to die, and then He gathers you all to the day of resurrection, of which there is no doubt. Additionally, due to the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, in the hadith or authentic collection regarding the hadith about faith, he says faith is that you believe in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, in resurrection, after death, and in fate, all of it. So, what kicks off the beginning of Yawm al-Qiyamah? Sorry? The horn. So, what's going on at this time? Is anyone aware what's happening before the trumpet is blown? Who's left? Does anyone have an idea who's left on the earth before the? Because of course, don't forget they say that the Qur'an has been lifted in the sense that the pages have been lifted. People aren't really that religious, so. They say that some of the worst people are left at the end of Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? Just before Yawm al-Qiyamah. How many trumpets are there? How many horns? Anyone have any idea? 2. So one is done at the time, right at the end of Yawm al-Qiyamah. And they say in the hadith that Israfil currently has his mouth to the horn and he's looking up at the arsh. This is in the hadith authentic. And he's waiting for the command to blow. So basically, everything's ready. And they're saying that he looks at the arsh and he doesn't blink because he fears to the effect that if he blinks, he might miss the command by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he blows into the horn, they say that the people who are left, they swoon and then they die. Okay? So that is what happens there. And of course, this is the concept of when the day of resurrection starts in that way. The second horn, though, is the resurrection itself, whereby people from the grave will come up. And now what they say is that there'll be a rainfall which occurs. That, there's a part of our body, it's the coccyx at the back, right? Which they say that stays. And when the rain falls, then it goes into the earth, and through that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will revive the dead. So after the second horn, or at that point, the people will be like bodies in the graves, and they'll come out of the graves, and they'll be wondering. They'll be wondering what's happening. So this is what we say is the concept of resurrection from the grave. They say that, of course, Yeah. Is there any question on that before we move on? Yeah. It's all right. As in the non-Muslims?
No, like as in footballers, when obviously we know what the signs are.
Yeah.
But as you've mentioned, like sometimes it's not as straightforward as what it says. It might be something slightly different.
Yeah.
Than the same. Might be a metaphor.
Yeah.
How maybe confident are we? I don't know. How confident are we that we know that we could recognize signs?
So the hadith of Dajjal, which mentions that it will be written kafir on the head, right? And it does mention in the hadith to the effect that the believers will be able to read it. Now, whether that is we take that in a literal way or we mean that true believers as opposed to people who are sin, but we don't know the specifics, and there's probably commentary on it. But I think that we will be, like even the concept of killing, right? Lots of killing occur. We can see the signs. The reality is really the only way it's going to really hit you is when the major sign happens, such as when the sun comes from the west, etc. Everything else is gradual and it's happening and you're going to see it. Do you get my point? Wallahu a'lam, it's a good question. I think it's just the point isn't so much though looking for the signs, more so that we know it's going to happen and just being ready for it. Yeah. Okay. So then he says, so then after that, so of course we know that the believers, well, the disbelievers, they'll say that, are we going to be resurrected? They say, no, we don't. And indeed, you will be resurrected, and it is a challenge to them. Now, in the next one, he says, so from the 8th branch of faith is belief in the gathering of the people after they have been resurrected from their graves to the place of standing. So this is now at the point of the resurrection. Based on the speech of Allah, so he says, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ لِيَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ ولحديث عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما في صحيح مسلم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين حتى يغيب أحدهم في رشحه إلى أنآف أذنيه. So he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, do these people not realize that they will be raised up on a mighty day, a day when everyone will stand before the Lord of the worlds. يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. Also due to the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, narrated in Sahih Muslim, that the people will stand before the Lord of the worlds until one of them will be submerged in perspiration till halfway up his ears. Just before we continue, for those, I don't know if people got the message about on the group, that we do have a sign-in process for logging your attendance on the group. So this is for those people who want like a certificate of completion. It's not mandatory, and it's not mandatory to sign up on the group, by the way. But for those who do want it, we just ask that you sign in. As long as you do it by the end of today. It's called one tap. You just put your email in and you tap it on the day that you arrive, and then it will log your attendance, inshallah. So the gathering. So they say the gathering. So what happens is that the people come up from their graves. This is the resurrection. This is the ba'ath, right? Ba'ath is to resurrect something to come up. The hashr, which is mentioned in the hadith or mentioned in the bab, this bab, hashr means that the gathering of people. They are basically drove to an area. Now, what the majority of the scholars say, this is Sham. Sham is Palestine, parts of Syria, Palestine, the Levant region, bits of Jordan, all that area, which is said that many of the prophets were sent to and they were buried there, etc. This place is Mubarak, right? It is blessed. So this area is where they say that the hashr will be, that the people will be standing. Now, when we do Yawm al-Arafah, when we're standing, that is just meant to be a replication of what it will be like when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it is going to be in a sham. And of course, the people will differ. So some people, as it's mentioned, their perspiration will come up to their knees, others will come above that. And it's due to the fact of fear, that people will be fearful about what is going to happen. This mentioned in the hadith, which is authentic as well, that they'll be barefoot, naked and uncircumcised, right? And Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions in a hadith that when she heard this, she said, will they not look at each other? And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded that the day will be so terrifying, they won't even consider it. This is the imagery that one needs to think, that when you read Qur'an, when you hear about Yawm al-Qiyamah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references it a lot, it's about just reminding yourself that, you know what, this day is going to come. We have to be ready for it. We have to make sure that our heart is attentive. It should change you when you read the Qur'an. And just remember what it might be like. There's a story of a man called Hatim al-Asam. Hatim al-Asam was a famous scholar. He was a very pious scholar. And one day he went to, I think he had a teacher called Ahmed bin Miskin, I believe. And I'm just trying to remember what the story was, because I hadn't planned it, but it came to my mind just now, where he I think his family were very needy and they were very hungry. And I need to actually remember the story, subhanAllah. I'll have to mention it next time, I don't want to get it wrong. There is another story of Malik bin Dinar. Malik bin Dinar is a famous scholar and he was from the best of the tabi'in. And Malik bin Dinar, it was mentioned about him that he used to, he wasn't that religious initially, right? And he was someone who would be, they said he was like a police officer. But he was a bit of a tyrant, they said beforehand. But one day, and he used to drink a lot, and one day he had a child, a baby girl, and so he used to love his daughter, he used to spend a lot of time with her. And then as he's spending time with her, one day, you know, he would be drinking and she would knock over the drink, right? You know, accidentally, and he'd see it as a sign. Anyway, when she was about 4 or 5 years old, she passed away due to some illness. And he got really upset. So what did he do? He basically drank and drank and drank until he passed out. And then it said that in his dream, he was in his dream and he woke up and he saw that he was on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And as he was at Yawm al-Qiyamah, he saw behind him a huge snake and it was coming after him. So he starts to run, he starts running away, and as he's running away, he passes by an old man with white hair and a beard. And he says, oh, will you know, what is happening? Can you help me? This thing is trying to attack me. He says, I can't help you, I'm too weak, go over there. So he keeps running, he runs to the end of a cliff, and he looks over the cliff and he sees fire, he sees the hellfire. And the snake is still behind him. So he runs back, he comes past the man again, he says, will you not help me? So the man says, I'm too weak, I can't do anything about it. So he runs all the way, and the old man says to him, go to that hilltop, you might find something there. And he could see like a house. So he runs up towards the house. As he's coming up to the house, he sees a number of children. And as he's going forward, and don't forget the snake is behind him at this point, as he's going up to the children, he sees his daughter. And so he comes towards his daughter, and just when the snake is about to grab him, his daughter hugs him, and she does that, and the snake disappears. So he says to his daughter, he says, you know, what is this? And she said, you know, we're here because we've passed away, etc. And he says, what was that snake? And he said, and she said, the snake are your evil deeds. They were the deeds that were trying to take you to hellfire. And he says, but what about the old man? Who was that? What was that old man? And he said, the old man were your good deeds. He said, they were so small and so insignificant that they were not able to repel the evil that was coming towards you. And she recites the ayah, لَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. So she mentions the ayah that has the time not come for the hearts to be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But anyway, he woke up, and it is said in that story that he changed, he switched, that dream just switched him, and he became from one of the famous tabi'een, right? He was a proficient scholar, someone who was known to be a worshipper, but it changed him. And they said there's one narration, of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but they said then he went to Fajr that morning, and as he's going into the mosque, he hears the ayah being recited that she recited. The point being what? That, of course, these are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give these dreams to people as a way to remind them, to wake them up, etc. But it's definitely going to happen. 100%, no doubt, we are going to be, we're going to have our books, we're going to be accountable for what we do, everything. You know, Ibn Abbas says that even in Surah Kahf, there's an ayah that he mentions that the tafsir of it is that even what you eat, what you look at, how you smile, all of these things you're going to be held accountable for. How you walk, how you dress, all of these things. The smallest of things that you think that is very insignificant, if the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam can be rebuked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, abasa wa tawalla, to turn away from Ibn Abi Mukhtum, then that's just a turning away, and he didn't even intend it in a negative way. It wasn't a sin at all. We just call it khilaf al-awla, that it wasn't the best possible thing, but it was nowhere near a sin, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referenced that and descended an ayah because of a slight turning away. Imagine what will happen with us. For this is something which is very important. You want to do adhan? Adhan kare or no? Okay, oh, that's fine. So anyway, what they said, some of the scholars, is that يوم نطوي السماء كطي السجل, that on that day the skies will be folded and they'll be rolled up. Okay, Bismillah. So of course on that day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَالَّذِينَ يُحْشَرُونَ عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ إِلَى جَهَنَّمْ. So one of the commentators, they mentioned that on the day the disbelievers or those who were considered to be polytheists, they'll be brought by their faces, they'll be dragged by their faces on this particular day, which is the day of Hashr. And they mentioned that the reason it was because they didn't pray. They weren't people who prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was a form of humiliation for them. Of course, we will just be, inshallah, standing. We'll receive our book. We'll receive the accountability. Our deeds will be weighed accordingly. But in their case, then they will be of those people who will be brought like that. Of course, at the other end are people like the Mujahideen, those people who fought for the sake of Allah, and they passed away. They will come with their wound oozing from blood. They will be covered in red. It will be red, but it will smell of musk. And so the scholars say this is known as al-jaza min jins al-amal, that the way that you used to be in the dunya, how you end in the dunya, you will be brought like that in the akhirah. And that's why you have to, we say that innamal a'mal bil khawatim, that the deeds are by the end result. People say that, oh, you know what, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50 years old, and I've been sinning all my life, what's the point, right? But in our tradition, you keep going because it's what you end on which is more important than what you began on. Do you get my point? There are many people who have switched in their lives. You think about, for example, Umar ibn al-Khattab, who, radiallahu anhu, wanted to actually kill the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or you had, or to attack him, for example, you have people like Khalid bin Walid, who was the sword of Allah. Initially, he was fighting severely against the Muslims, right? You have this, the grandson of Genghis Khan, this Burki Khan. He used to be part of the army of Genghis Khan, and they were slaughtering. He became Muslim. He even fought against Hulagu, I think, after the Battle of Baghdad. When they came into Baghdad and they made the rivers of blood. He became Muslim, right? There's many people. Even in contemporary now, there's a guy who was part of the far right with Geert Wilders in Holland, Arnold or something. He's become a Muslim, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change the heart. So it's about how you end. It's not about how you begin, yeah? So this is the point here. And so the reason being is that you should never think it's too difficult or too late to start. Even if you feel that you're relatively religious, you can do more. If you're not reciting much Qur'an, then you say to yourself, I'm going to recite 2 pages a day from now. If you feel that you're not doing enough istighfar, I'm going to do istighfar. If you're not praying your full salawat, start from tomorrow, pray full salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wishes, He'll forgive everything you've done in the last 70, 80 years. It's nothing to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? No one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not accountable to anyone, but everyone is accountable to Him. La malja wa la manja minka illa ilayk. That there is no refuge and no sanctuary from you except to you. Normally, when you want to escape a punishment from someone or something, you have to go away from the source of the punishment and find refuge somewhere. With Allah, it doesn't work like that. If you want to escape the punishment of Allah, you have to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't go somewhere else. And so this point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of all khair. And so whatever you can do, and you leave it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the final one he comes into, then we'll end on this last bab. He says, al-Imanu bi-anna ad-dar al-mu'minin wa ma'wahum al-jannah wa dar al-kafirin wa ma'wahum al-nar. So he says, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى بَلَى مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. So he says here that on the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that nay, they will So he says, those who do evil and are surrounded by their sins will be the inhabitants of the fire, there to remain. While those who believe and do good deeds will be the inhabitants of the garden, there to remain. Also due to the hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma in the 2 authentic collections, indeed when any one of you dies, I think is this the one? Yeah, we didn't mention it. He is shown his seat in the hereafter in the morning and evening. If he is amongst the people of the garden, he is shown his seat from amongst the people of the garden. And if he is one from amongst the denizens of hell, then he is shown his seat from amongst the denizens of hell. And it is said to him, that is your seat until Allah raises you towards Him on the day of resurrection. So, of course, Jahannam and Jannah, these could be done over many classes, right? We're going to spend 6-7 minutes. We won't talk too much about Jahannam, inshallah. Let's end on a good note. Of course, Jahannam, we hope that inshallah we don't attend. The one thing to bear in mind is that hellfire is not just for disbelievers and for munafiqeen. Muslims can go to the hellfire due to major sins. So we never, we should never be too cautious or never be too, too comfortable that we will never enter hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can decree that if He wishes, if we have been too sinful and we have not sought tawbah. That's why Umar radiallahu anh said if there was a caller in the sky and it was said everyone apart from one person will enter Jannah, he said I would hope it was me. And if a caller in the sky said everyone apart from one will enter hellfire, he said I would fear it was me. So that's how you should feel. Your feeling should be that whilst I hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah, I may go to Jahannam. If you do that, you will never become too proud or arrogant. Yeah, this is very important at any time of life. So then he says that, of course, Jannah, what is Jannah? Jannah, of course, is eternity. Hum fiha khalidun. This is for eternity. And in Tafsir Jalalain, which we're going to talk about, it says, La yafnoon wa la yukhrajun. It will never perish and they'll never be kicked out. Once you're in Jannah, you're in Jannah. You enter in, there's no exit. And when you're entering Jannah, there's so much to say, but when you're coming through the doors, there's ayat which says, the angel says, Salamun alaykum tibtum, fadkhuluha khalidin. That salam upon you, you have done so well, enter for eternity. Wa salamun alaykum bima sabartum. That salam upon you and peace upon you with what you have sought out of patience, but it is the best of places. And you will walk to your house, your palace. And the question is, the scholar said, how do we understand that? That because we've never been in Jannah before. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you ilham that you will know where your palace is in Jannah. As soon as you enter through the doors, the angels send praise on you, you will walk directly to your house. And the house is rubies and gardens and, gold, etc., etc. You will enjoy it. They say, Imam al-Lusi says that when you feel hungry, you look at a bird in the sky and then you just imagine you want to eat it and it will be grilled in front of you. That's what he mentions in his tafsir. We will be 33 years old. And interestingly enough, I remember seeing a kind of study which said that the most stressful and depressing time is around that age, because people start to have kids, they've got the stresses of work, etc., and around that age is very stressful. It's quite interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises you up at a time which is potentially your most stressful time in your life. There'll be no sun, there'll be no moon, but eternal light, right? There's many things. There's so many things that you can't, imagine. The beautiful hadith I love is that فيها ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. In the hadith of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in Jannah there are things which the eye has never seen, the ear has never heard, and the heart has never thought about. You can't even imagine that. What is that in Jannah that not one person from the beginning of time to the end of time has even occurred in his heart that is in Jannah? It must be something so secret and so amazing, so out of this realm but we will benefit from. The things that our eyes, and our eye has never even seen. The point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you Jannah and Jahannam as a form of targhib wa tarhib, that you hope and you want to go to this Jannah, but you fear that you will not go to this Jannah. And so finally, the greatest thing, what's the greatest thing about Jannah? What is the best thing that everyone is waiting for? Anyone know? To see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they say that you will see Allah Azza wa Jal, this is from our Aqidah, from Ahlul Sunnah, that you will see Allah Azza wa Jal this in such clarity, the way that you see the moon in the sky, right? And there are hadith which mention to the effect that the people, and I'm paraphrasing the hadith, I don't have it written, but it's mentioned that how, and you can look this up and I'll end on this, it's an authentic hadith where people will be gathering together, and I think it's on a Friday because Friday is a special time even in Jannah, and there'll be people who are on the sides, the outskirts, and they'll be sitting down. And there'll also be in the middle, there'll be people or some of the Anbiya and the special ones on seats of light, pulpits of light, and they'll be sitting there. And they'll be waiting because they're going to be given the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people, interesting in the hadith, the people on the side who are not on the same level as those Anbiya, they will not feel that like themselves that they are less or worse than anyone else. They'll just feel that they have been honored. And they'll wait, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal Himself, and then the people will rejoice, and they will not stop looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jal will manifest Himself in a way which of course befits His majesty, and this will be the highlight and the beauty of Jannah. And khalas, yani, what can you say to that? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes us of those who enter Jannah. We have to work for it. It's not something that comes easy. You have to hope. The ulama, they say that the most correct opinion about entering Jannah is the following, is that you will only enter Jannah by the rahmah of Allah. You will not enter by your deeds. This seems to be the most correct version, is that you, and this is the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about himself, that none of you will enter into Jannah by his deeds. It's only by the rahmah of Allah. But they say the daraja, or the levels of which you attain in Jannah, are due to your deeds. So you might have two people enter due to the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but someone has done more Qur'an, someone has helped more orphans, someone who's more sincere, they could be higher. But the first entry is only if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows His rahmah to you. There's no other way. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He envelopes in His rahmah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair.